The Callisto myth, as told by Ovid, is the patriarchal myth that has been left to us by the ancient Zeus clans. If these patriarchal clans rewrote the myth to fit their male-dominated society, the question arises, what did the original Callisto myth signify? Though impossible to say exactly, there are some fascinating bits and pieces of information that allow us to piece together what might have been going on. For example, the name Callisto means fairest one, which was actually a surname for the goddess Diana herself. The suggestion is, then, that maybe Diana and Callisto are one and the same. During the reign of the great goddess, Greek women recognized two types of virginity: physical virginity, with which we are familiar, and psychological virginity, with which we are not. Psychological virginity is the youthful state of a maiden who needs to be prepared for her role as an adult matriarchal leader. Thus, young women were virgins in both aspects, and to ready these girls for their role in the world, both types of virginity had to be sacrificed. Thus, girls were taught how to handle themselves as matriarchs, and when they were ready to leave the other virgins, they submitted to a ritual marriage known as hieros gamos, or a sacred marriage. In this marriage, they were symbolically wedded. During this ritual, the young girls dressed as bears and danced around the bride, who was then taken into the temple, where she had sex with an anonymous male. This anonymous male is an important figure, a symbolic king who reigns for 1 year and is then sacrificed. Losing her physical virginity is thus symbolic of losing her psychological virginity, for the maiden is now mature and ready for her role as mother in the external world. With this as background, let's now compare what may have been the original myth with the patriarchal version. In the original myth, Callisto is simply another name for Diana. The Greek word used for her and her followers was parthenos, which means young girl. There's an interesting confusion with the translation of this word. This is the same word used in the Greek New Testament of the Bible to describe Mary, but it was translated as virgin rather than as young girl, and you know the rest of that story. In the patriarchal version, Callisto and Diana are separate, with Callisto seen as a follower of Diana. In the original myth, the virginity associated with Diana is psychological virginity, signifying purity. In a matriarchy, physical virginity is unimportant. The patriarchal version, though, references only physical virginity, turning Callisto into a mortal who is soiled. Physical virginity is essential within a patriarchy, for it ensures that the man's heir is really his and not another man's. The stress in the matriarchy was on psychological virginity, on how the woman, who is a dominant person in the family unit, prepares herself for childbirth and governance. Again, the patriarchy is not interested in this aspect of the woman, and so stresses only the notion of physical virginity. In the original version of the myth, young girls have sex with anonymous males who are symbolic gods, as part of their rite of passage to womanhood. This is obviously unacceptable in a patriarchal society. Thus, Callisto is portrayed as being raped by a god, Zeus, in disguise. In the original myth, after the ritual, the girl, now a woman, is sent away, ready to face the world. The patriarchal version turns this into Callisto being banished by Diana. The attainment of womanhood is now seen as a punishment for her sexual behavior. In the original myth, when the woman leaves, the stress is placed on her psychological development. She grows up to be independent of and dominant over males. Womanhood is not defined in terms of a monogamous marriage. In the patriarchal version, Callisto is persecuted by Hera, lives a life of suffering, and is eventually made immortal by Zeus. Thus we see how the version of the myth handed down to us by Ovid may well be a reinterpreted version of an earlier myth created during the reign of the great goddess. This is obviously a popular feminist position, so let's now look at a few other feminist aspects of this myth. First, consider the notion of sex in the Callisto myth. There must be some point during the sacred marriage ceremony during which the female realizes that giving her virginity to Diana consists in giving it to a man who represents a god. This is indicated in the myth by Zeus's disguise. For the feminist, this is the modern female's realization of patriarchal control and sacrifices she must make within such a society. Zeus's revealing himself to Callisto becomes a symbol of a girl's true passion, the animus within her, a revelation that may very well take her by surprise. The banishment of Callisto is seen to reflect the fact that, for the female, sex, and ultimately childbirth, is a rite of passage which the woman must go through alone. Feminists also utilize the Callisto myth to explicate several points of interpretation on rape. First, passivity. In a patriarchy, the woman, as wife and mother, is a passive instrument awaiting the male's mastery. She is shaped by her biological function as a reproductive machine and is at the mercy of the physically stronger male. As indicated in the myth, the outcome of rape is isolation. The woman is ashamed, even though it is not her fault. In common feminist parlance, any sex in a patriarchal society is rape. This is because women in a patriarchal society have succumbed to the values of the patriarchy and thus are not psychologically free in their choices. As long as women are subservient to men, sex, even in marriage, is a form of rape. Zeus's disguise becomes the romantic dream of a young girl, while rape is the reality of a woman in a man's world. Under the patriarchy, women are the strictest keepers of sexual mores. Men categorize women as either whores or virgins. They enjoy the whores, but bestow true and lasting benefits only on the virgins. Thus, it is in a woman's best interest to be virginal, and not only that, she also accepts the male valuation and actively protects virginity as something sacred. Furthermore, Hera's unforgiving attitude toward Callisto symbolizes a woman's desire to see other women victimized as she has been. If women step out of line, they are held responsible for their fate. We have looked in depth at the Callisto myth, showing that behind the version that we are familiar with may very well lie another version with another story. In this case, the deeper version is a story of the great goddess, but in other myths it may be something else. This is how I approach all myth. The stories we have must contain deeper truths. They were not made up simply for entertainment. This is the excitement of mythology. It's like an archaeological dig, where you try to determine what is going on by getting deeper and deeper into the levels. Keep this